Hello guys, new day, new vlog. And for today's video, we will be learning about one of the most common topics of language, and that is subject-verb agreement. And yes, I believe everybody has already a background knowledge about this topic because this has been repeatedly discussed by our teachers since elementary days. But in this video, I'll make sure that you will learn new concept or it will add something in your knowledge. And this one is a help from me in order for us to really get rid of our mistakes or lessen the mistakes that we commit every time that we use the English language. By the way, this video is a request from my friend, and of course, who am I to reject the request? And if you're new here in my channel, please do not forget to give this a thumbs up, click that subscribe button, and ring that notification bell for future uploads. So let us begin now our discussion about subject-verb agreement. I believe everybody has an idea of what is subject-verb agreement all about since your elementary days until your high school, or a little refresher in your college education. However, my responsibility right now is to give you a refresher and a recapitulation on how do we really agree subject and verb when making a sentence in a paragraph. But before we proceed to the actual discussion, talking about 11 rules that we need to follow and put in mind, I'll be giving you first the answer of the question, how do we really determine if the subject and the verb are singular or plural? So as we all know, the subject is singular if it only talks about one person or a thing, and the verb ends with an S. While for the subject, which is plural, it also talks about two or more things or persons, while the verb does not end with an S. So let us try to check how it really looks like if we are going to talk about the specific rules in subject-verb agreement. Let us begin with the first rule. If the subject is singular, the verb must be singular too. For example, she dances, he sings, John plays Dota 2, and Maria goes shopping. So if you would observe, we have used here two pronouns and two personal nouns. These are all singular, that means to say the verbs must agree with the subjects. So, as what I've said, if the verb is singular, it ends with the letter S. So dances, sings, plays, and goes. But there is an exception of the rule, especially if we are using the singular subjects I and they. The verbs must be in plural form. For example, I like you, and the student expressed disappointment about the school fees. They appeal their concern to the administration. So for the first sentence, I like you, I is a first nominative pronoun. That means to say it should always be partnered with a plural form. While the second sentence, even though that we know that the subject of the sentence is the student and we use the word they there, it only means that we need to use a gender neutral pronoun. So instead of saying the student expressed disappointment about the school fees, he or she appeals their concern to the administration, we need to use the gender neutral pronoun, which is they, since the gender of the subject student is not specified in the sentence. So even though that they is singular, it also needs, it needs to be partnered with a verb that is in plural form. So that is the first rule. Singular subject must have singular verb. Second rule, if the subject is plural, the verb must be plural too. For example, they dance, we sing, John and JV play Mobile Legends, and my friends go shopping. So that is very simple. these pronouns, which are they and we, and personal nouns John and JV, as well as this noun friends, are all plural, so they need to have a plural verb which do not or does not end with s. For the third rule, when the subject of the sentence is composed of two or more nouns and pronouns connected by and, use plural verb. So for example, the doctoral student and the panel members discuss the parts of the dissertation that need revision. Another example, my students and I take the first bus going to the museum for the educational tour. So these examples would tell us that even though the two subjects, even though the first one is singular and the second one is plural, they need to be partnered with a plural verb because they are combined by the conjunction and. So same goes with the second example sentence. For the next rule, fourth rule, when there is one subject and more than one verb, the verb must agree with the subject. So in this particular rule, we only need to focus to how many is the subject for this particular sentence. For example, she writes a poem every day and performs it while facing in a mirror. So in this sentence, our subject is the pronoun she, which is singular, so it needs to have a singular verb or singular verbs. And these are the following: writes and performs. Now if we have a plural verb, for example, Crystal and Edward are private school teachers and teach language subjects. So our subjects here are Crystal and Edward, and our verbs are and teach. So that's how are we going to use this particular rule. For our fifth rule, when a phrase comes between the subject and the verb must agree with the subject, not with the noun or pronoun in the phrase following the subject. So in this particular rule, the phrase here does not really affect of what could be the verb that we need to use depending on the number of subjects. For example, the student who works every night graduates with Latin honors. So in this sentence, our subject is the student, which is only one, and our verb is graduates. So even though that there is a phrase in between the subject and the verb, it will not affect the number of the subject and the verb itself. So another example, the rationale of the study was to determine the effectiveness of visualization and writing. So it is just the same with the first example. The rationale here, or the rationale, is the subject of the sentence, and it is combined with a prepositional phrase in between of the study. But of course, rationale is only singular or only one, so we need to use the singular verb was. So that is for the fifth rule. For our next rule, which is the sixth rule, when two or more singular nouns or pronouns are connected by or nor, use singular verb. So in this particular rule, we only have singular subject, but connected with the conjunctions or nor. For example, the president or vice president takes care of the class when a teacher is not around. So if you would observe, we have two subjects, the president and the vice president. If you think about it, these are two individuals. But in this particular sentence, we are choosing in between the two. So the president or the vice president. So even though we use a conjunction or, but because the nouns are singular, we need to partner it with a singular verb, and that is takes. For the seventh rule, when a compound subject contains both singular and plural noun or pronoun and joined by or nor, the verb must agree with the subject closest to the verb. This one is one of the trickiest or the most confusing part of the subject-verb agreement because it is a combination of singular and plural subjects. But with this rule, this is very simple. You only need to consider which one is the closest to the verb. For example, the advisor or the parents finalized the policy for this school year. So in this sentence, the subjects are advisor and the parents. Now, because the rule says follow the number of the subject nearest to the verb. So parents is plural. That means to say the verb that we need to use is a plural verb. So that is finalize. But when we are going to shift that one or shuffle the subject, it will turn like this. The parents or the advisor finalizes the policy for the school year. So if you would observe, the first subject is parents, which is plural, and the second subject is advisor, which is singular. Now, since advisor is nearest to the verb must agree with the nearest subject. So we will use the singular verb finalizes. So that's how you're going to make use of the rule for this particular manner. Next one is the 8th rule. Indefinite pronouns are singular and always take a singular verb. So for example, these indefinite pronouns are someone, somebody, anyone, anybody, and the like. For example, everyone in this batch asks for a refund. So even though that our subject and our verb is having a prepositional phrase in between, it does not change the number of the subject as well as the verb. So everyone is an indefinite pronoun partnered with a singular verb, asks. Another example, each of the frontliners demands for a strict lockdown. So this one, if you would observe, the noun nearest to the verb is a plural noun, frontliner, so there are many. However, that is not the subject of the sentence. The subject of the sentence is the indefinite pronoun each. So that each must have a singular verb, and that is demands. Next, someone from the school gives me a present. So the same explanation from our first and second example. So that's how are we going to use or write our sentence if we use indefinite pronouns. 9th rule is non-count nouns take singular verbs or uncountable nouns. We need to remember that uncountable nouns could also be abstract. That is why we could also use the abstract nouns that we know, just like respect, peace, or any other uncountable or abstract nouns that we know. For example, according to you, a UP graduate, poverty is a hindrance to his success. So uncountable noun here, or the subject, is poverty, and of course our verb is which is singular. Another example, diabetes, if not treated, is deadly. And lastly, love is a choice. So that is how we're going to agree the noun, uncountable noun and the singular verb. Our 10th rule, in sentence beginning with there is or there are, the subject follows the verb. So you need to remember that even though that we have the words there is and there are, they are not considered as the subject of the sentence, but instead the subject of the sentence follows the verb. For example, there is a little miscommunication. So for this sentence, is the verb of the sentence, and miscommunication is our adjective. Our noun. And last example, there are many factors affecting teacher retention. So are is the verb, so which means to say there are two or more things that we consider. So that would be the factors, which is the subject of the sentence. So you don't really need to be confused on using there is or there are if you know the number of the subject. But of course, again, there is and there are not the subjects of the sentence. And lastly, our 11th rule, collective nouns are words that imply more than one person but are considered singular and take a singular verb. For example, The group gathers every week. The committee agrees on the suspension of classes. And my family always eats together. So these collective nouns, of course, are having different members or different individuals. But because we think that these particular collective nouns are working together, so they are considered as one. So they need to have a singular verb. However, there is a less common usage or example when we take a collective noun separately. For example, the committee participate in various volunteer activities in their private lives. So in this particular sentence, we all know that the members of the committee have different things done in their private lives because of the word various and private lives. So individually, they are being taken consideration. So, but this particular example is not really used commonly, or this is only less common. This is less commonly used by English speakers. But most of the time, collective nouns are considered singular. That is why they need to take a singular verb. So those are the following rules that we need to follow for subject-verb agreement. So I believe that you have already understood these 11 rules in a simple terms. And if you have any question, of course, our comment box is open for any questions and clarifications that you have. So there you have it, guys. Those are the 11 rules that we need to consider every time that we are going to use the English language in writing or speaking. So if you have any clarifications or questions or even a request for content, please feel free to write that one in our comment box, and it's my pleasure to answer those questions, clarifications, and requests. And before we end this video, I'll not forget to give these people a shout out. From Cebu Bradford School, Sir Gian Bronio, and one of my brilliant students, Seth Villegas from University of Cebu. So I hope you will continue supporting me in my YouTube journey. Char. So before we end, and if you find this video helpful, please do not forget to give this video a thumbs up, and see you in our next video. Bye!